What's up? Today's video is going to be another book diary. It's going to be for Days of Blood and Starlight, which is the sequel to Laini Taylor's Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So if you haven't read A Daughter of Smoke and Bone, do not watch this. If you haven't read Days of Blood and Starlight, don't watch this because I'm going to go through all of my annotations and all of that good stuff in this video, so there will be spoilers everywhere. If you haven't read the third one yet, I think you'll be fine. I'm doing these because Kaz and Chloe and Red and I are reading these together for the Daughter of Smoke and Bone Readalong, which is DOSAB Readalong on the hashtags everywhere, and that's also our Twitter name, and we are doing live shows for them. So our first live show was on Catriona's channel in April for the first book, and then this video should be going up on Saturday, May 11th, and if that's the case, then this is also the same day that the live show for this book is on Red's channel. All of the channels are linked down below. Today is May 9th, so I need to get this book read. I'm 3 hours into the audiobook. I am really loving this reread. I freaking love these books. Okay, people, it is now the 10th. I'm substitute teaching, hence the background, and this is how far I've gotten through with annotations, although I'm farther than that now in audiobook. Page 1, we're starting with some funny stuff. We have Susanna and Mick talking. Susanna says, "I'd do it myself if I could, but I can't, I'm a girl." And Mick says, "I'm still not going to pee on Karu's ex-boyfriend for you." Then on page 7, we have some sad. Akiva's wretchedness was a gnawing thing, the impossible waking nightmare of the truth of what he had done. This book is very sad. Akiva's thinking about Eli, which is the second moon. Akiva tensed at the sight of her. "I know you, Angel," she might have whispered. "The goddess of assassins has tasted my blood," he thought. "Help me to see Karu safe and you can have every drop." So then Susanna is emailing Karu, "Gone to another world. I always knew you were a freaky chick, but I never saw this one coming." I love Susanna so much. My red is like an angry stuff. Surely it wasn't a true assault, or was it? Right away he had to go airborne to clear it. This is Akiva thinking about when Hazael and Laraz, his siblings, show up. They're like kind of being threatening, and so he thinks it's not a true assault, but then he has to go airborne to clear it from getting hit, and then whatever they did, he would never hurt them. Here's my first favorite. The axe blade was embedded in the hard pan next to his cheek, and Laraz was already walking away, so they didn't actually hurt each other, but they're angry. They have a conversation, and Laraz says, "No more secrets." So we have Akiva's new hell to have everything change and nothing change. The vengeance that had sustained him all these years were gone. Aftermath was ugly. There were slave caravans on the move, but if his own vengeance was long spent, the Emperor's wasn't. And he kind of goes into some of the stuff that the Emperor has planned. Here I wrote that, why does Akiva think that the Thurible is Karu? And how would she have gotten there into the Kirin Caves? And why does he assume that she's dead? That's my questions. The Seraphim, "Of course they knew," said another soldier. "We're coming for them all." He pronounced it like justice. Bethina cast him a glance. And this was interesting because we haven't met Bethina before, but she also is having sympathy towards these chimera that are not soldiers. These were just families and non-soldiers. And she says, "What if we let them get away?" And several of her comrades laughed as if she'd made a joke. She's the one that thinks this feels like a trap, but she doesn't think anything of it because it's not going to possibly be a trap, except that a laugh. It sounded like a match, dry, dark. The war was not over, though for her comrades, it abruptly was. And then I just screamed, "Ah," because this is the little thing that Karu writes Susanna, and she thinks is a riddle to find her. On page 44, asymmetry, when it came to Revenant necklace, was not a good thing. And so she's talking about how to make the necklaces and how to make the bodies. Then on page 50, we're talking about Issa, Yazri, Twiga, every soul in Laura Mendy. They're dead, Karu. It's too late. She's just kind of talking about like the destruction of everything that happened with Laura Mendy. Her life as madrigal was twining itself into her soul as Karu, and it was fought with death, with loss, and at the core of her stunned grief was the knowledge that she had enabled it. If it had been Akiva there in the room, she could not have spared his life again. This is the first time she sees Laura Mendy. She's thinking back on it. And then, of course, it was Thiago who finds her, and he says, "Is it really you?" So he knows that Karu is madrigal. And then I say we hate Thiago because he's so disgusting and nasty and Then we have the "so careless" was the first thing Thiago said when we were drawn up short, rushing from the burning temple to find a company of soldiers waiting. This is from when Madrigal was found. Akiva had raised his arm summoning magic. What he intended to do, Madrigal never knew, because Thiago was ready for him and 4 revenant soldiers had already thrown up their palms. Depressing! He would have killed Akiva then, this is Thiago, but one of the more level-headed followers stepped in and pulled him off, so it hadn't ended there. And then, of course, Akiva was tortured before Madrigal was murdered. We are the inheritors, Carew. What my father and Brimstone were to our people, this is Thiago speaking. You and I are those who remain. I just hate Thiago. He's so gross. This was surprising that Thiago offered to tithe, which is be in pain for the magic. So the pleasure is not in the pain, it's sparing you the pain. He's disgusting. He's just so gross, even though he's like saying these nice things. So then he says he wasn't himself, Carew. I was in love with you, and to see you with him like that, you drove me a little mad. He's talking about why he murdered her, and I wrote, you are disgusting.
Because literally this whole like plot of him now being nice reminds me a whole lot of how people who are abusive act, because they get angry for no reason and they overreact and they murder their significant others or beat them or whatever, and then afterwards they're like, oh no, I didn't mean it because I loved you, or I still love you, and then that's how they get their apologies out. And that's why a lot of people who are in abusive relationships stay.
This is still Thiago. He's talking about how, I won't lie, when I saw you in the ruins, I almost fell to my knees. This is when he sees her as Carew for the first time. It was salvation and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, I don't believe anything he says for the same reason I was just talking about. He's talking about like they're basically killing their own people and then remaking their bodies or keeping them in thuribles so that they can travel through the portal in the sky back to Earth because they needed wings in order to be safe while they continue their work. She's doing all of this work and she makes the body, and Thiago says good girl, which is just disgusting. She bristled at the words and the caressing tone in which she spoke them. Am I, she wondered, as she sank to her knees to raise the dead, which is just, he's skeevy and then she feels guilty and I hate everything about it. The dead were strung up on the aqueduct, 8 seraphim with their wings fanned wide. What did this? Someone choked out. From the ashes it read, we are arisen. This is Thiago's first decision on how to show the seraphim that they are back. The corners of the dead angels' mouths had been carefully slit, widened into rictus grins. The slavers knew exactly what it meant, and so did the slaves, and all eyes grew sharp, some with fear, others anticipation. Freed slaves melted away into the landscape because they were released. Everything is depressing. There's this cute little, like, once upon a time story, and it says this was not that world, and I hate that it isn't. So, are the enemy dead? He asked. No, sir, only our own. This is seraphim, and no blood on their weapons. This is when they find those seraphim that have the grins and everything. So then the slavers were fed the slaves' shackles. So Akiva, slaves were held to be a necessary evil in the affairs of the empire, but Akiva did not share that belief and didn't mourn the loss of slavers. They're asking about a resurrectionist. Was it possible? He thought of the thurible he had found, its small message scrawled in a bold hand, Carew. We're going back in time to when Joram, which is the leader of the seraphim, killed the head of the Chimera and Brimstone, and Joram had hissed in the warlord's ear, you were never going to win, you are animals. Did you really think you could rule the world? That was not our dream. Because all I wanted was to be free, and I hate everything about this book. Okay, it is life that expands to fill world. Life is your master, or death is, had said Brimstone. Enjoy it, Joram, for you will never know another. You are lord of a country of ghosts, and that is all that you will ever be. Anger was the emperor's resting state. This is the Seraphim Emperor. He killed Brimstone on the spot. The warlord, the ancient creature, lowered that rack of broken antlers and launched himself at the emperor. It took 2 soldiers leaping in to put him down, but not before he speared Joram with one jagged prong and felled him, not killing him, not even seriously wounding him, but stealing his dignity on his day of triumph. Fuck, yes, I didn't like the warlord, but like, Joram deserves it. We meet Wrath, another slaver, a fearsome Dashnag boy whose long white fangs made Sveva shrink up like a wilting flower, who had told them why.
This whole like subplot is really fascinating because we get to learn a little bit more about Chimera. So Chimera obviously have multiple different bodies and stuff like that, and there are Chimera who are born as they are, right? The ones without the hamsas. And so in this part, we learn that there are predator and prey within Chimera, and the Dashnag boy is a predator style Chimera. And so the prey one, Sveva, is afraid of him because he has these big teeth, and she knows that he eats flesh and she doesn't. And he says to her, they don't eat each other, but he does eat animals. But like, everybody's an animal, which is the most bizarre thing to read about if you think about the fact that like we're animals too. And so then you really get into some vegetarian thought processes and stuff. And it's really fascinating. So we're on page 88 now. But the revenants had come from where the moons only knew on wings such as she had never seen, more terrifying than anything out of a nightmare, and just in time. And then the Dashnag boy tells Sveva, you have to go. We come back to Mick and Zuzana. There's always funny stuff when Zuzana's around. Don't get me started on that email. I want to kill her a little bit. And then they start making a joke, and she says, then I sign everything, Mrs. Mikolas Bavra, with a heart dotting the I. And he says, I like the sound of us. And she says, please, if you ever did ask me to marry you, don't even think I would identify myself as some addendum of you. He says, that sounded like the only quibble is that what you'd call yourself, not if you'd say yes. She says, I didn't say that. So you wouldn't marry me? Ridiculous question. I'm 18. Oh, it's an age thing. And then she tells him that there will be tasks like in a fairy tale before she can say yes. Karoo had been reluctant to come back to Arret. Then she talks about being inside of magic. She went to a place inside of herself that was entirely vulnerable. But the Kasbah, which is where they are on Earth, is very perfectly hidden. Several chimeras stood in the arcaded gallery that faced the main gate, and they fell silent when she drifted down before them. They don't like that she doesn't have wings. She has crescent moon blades hung at her hips, reassurance that she wished she didn't need. But her comrades didn't need to know it was them that she feared. Someone whispered behind her back, traitor. They all know, which I still don't really understand how they all know. So an art form all of its own, he had called them, and paid her the strangest, the ickiest compliment of her life. You make beautiful bruises, says Thiago. He's so gross. The reason that they hiss traitor behind Karoo's back is because they know that if they die, she's the resurrectionist, and they were not used to trusting a traitor with their resurrection. 10, which is Thiago's second, says that this guy, Razor, was perplexed by his head. He'll get used to it. But a lion's head Karoo on a heth? They were fairly horrific, actually, with great compound eyes and scissoring ant mandibles that resembled crab claws. 10 says, I suppose he is much prettier now. And she says, I'm expecting his thank you every day. Yes, well, don't sheath your claws. It was a chimera expression roughly equivalent to don't hold your breath, though more menacing with the implied necessity of self-defense. 10 offers to be her assistant, like the Naja woman. What was her name? And Karoo stiffens because how dare you mention Issa? I believe he meant for you to accept because she's trying not to. She's thinking back on the past, and she saw 10 using the Arza fruit for archery practice, and they were so big. The way that the group had looked at her, she couldn't recall it without a scald of shame. It was 10 who had said their heads. What else would we do with them, she had asked. And so it kept coming back to her later, and her admiration didn't last. Why not both bury the dead and avenge them? So a queer collision of reactions were happening these days. Karoo's were foremost, the most immediate, but Madrigal's were her too. Her two selves coming together with a strange kind of vibration. It wasn't disharmony exactly, because they are both her, and this is just so fascinating. As she's trying to tell 10, no, you can't be my assistant, she says that a smith would be more helpful to band the teeth in silver for stringing. And 10 says, the smith is busy forging weapons. And Karoo says, what am I forging? Jewelry? And then she says that the smith can't be spared. I'm surprised Thiago can spare you. Who will brush his hair for him, she thinks. He snarls you, and he leaps. This is Razor. He leaps at Karoo, and I don't understand how he knew about her. What? So then he says, angel lover, he spat, and shame hit Karoo like a flare. Ungrateful asshole, she thought, and she struck an unexpected nerve of humor. She and Susanna used to call everything assholes. Take her back to her room, says Thiago, and he just basically treats her like a child, and I hate everything about it. And then he's talking about how she needs to be safe, and I don't believe that he's trustworthy or nice. I don't like him. I think that he's trying to make sure she lives because he needs her, is she's the only one who knows how to resurrect people, but if anybody else knew how to do the resurrections, he would kill her on the spot. 10 is completely caught off guard at the top of the stairs when Karoo shut the door in her face and slammed down the crossbar. "I love you, crossbar," whispered Karoo and petted it. So a knot loosened in her chest that she didn't know was there because Ziri was okay. Only there was no lightness in him now. His tread was heavy and his face grim. He was part of that group that did the thing to the seraphim. Chapter 26, page 119. The wolf was in the window right below Karoo's as Ziri looks up, and it was barely enough time to register the look of half hope on her face as she raised her hand to him, tentative, lonely, and then he shunned her because he looks down when he notices the wolf. The wolf had told him he must have no contact with her, and like, fuck the wolf. And little do we know that Ziri had tried to save her when she was magical. He, a skinny boy of 12, had thought he could storm the scaffold and what? Cut her pinion, her manacles? But I put a little heart because I love Ziri. He's so cute. He's talking about the Thiago. He led, and Ziri knew firsthand how his fearlessness spread like wildfire in the fray. "I hope," he says, Thiago, "that you have done grievous harm. I want to know the looks on their faces. I want to hear how they screamed because he's disgusting." "I'm important though," she insisted to herself. This is the cute little Spava. So Spava is just this random citizen. She's one of the prey. Remember that I was talking about earlier? And this whole part is so real because so far we've been following everybody who's very involved in the war. And this is our first moment where we get just like a random person who's not involved in the war, but the war is going on around her. And so she's talking about how, like, in the grand scheme of things, she's no more as important as the little like fly that's around her. But then she says, "I am important though," because she is. And I love that we are having this included, because even though it feels kind of like we're taken out of the action a little bit, there's still action going on, but like all of these real, normal people are still having to deal with the fact that this war is going on around them. Akiva is putting all his skills as a tracker to work at untracking and trying to keep the random different citizens of Chimera safe. So then Hazael asked, "What are we dealing with here, Akiva?" And finally he had to say it, "Revenants. It has to be." But they don't know who the resurrection is yet. So he didn't want to be the weapon anymore. This is Akiva still. Oh, he could desert. He could vanish right now. But it wasn't enough that he ceased to kill Chimera. He had dreams so much bigger than that once. Man, I love this book so much. So many different kinds of silence, Fava thought. This was the worst kind. This was the make a sound and die silence. It ended up being Fava's sister that gave them away, because as she wakes up, her eyes fluttered open. They fluttered open to see Raph's fearsome face mere inches from her own, and Sarazel opened her mouth and screamed. So then we go back to Mick and Susanna, and they're talking about another sighting of Karoo, and Mick asks if it was blue hair, and Susanna says pink. Actually, I guess the legions of Satan are exploring their color options. So that's everything for now. I definitely have read more, and so I'm gonna need to go through and add my annotations, and then I will show you what I have when I get there. All right, same day. We're still on May 10th, and guys, this is everything that I've annotated so far, and then this is where I'm up to now. So I'm a little bit more than halfway, maybe about 2/3 of the way through. The live show is tomorrow at 7 p.m. PST, and it's currently 6:40 on Friday. I'm gonna get it done, but I want to go through these annotations with you, so get ready because there are quite a few of them. On to page 149, we have "What are you doing?" It was a sharp demand, and it came from Laraz. This is after they have butchered civilians. And she says, "It looks like you're about to add to your tally, but that can't be, can it? Because no self-respecting soldier would ink today on their hands." And the guy who she's talking to says, he says basically they were armed. And she says, "Give a slave a knife and it becomes a worthy opponent. How many of those fought back?" As she looks at his fingers. "I earned my marks." And she says, "Not today, you didn't." And then she also says, "If I see fresh ink on any of you tomorrow, I'm taking fingers." This whole part is also funny because Hazael is just great. Hazael says, "What about me? I'm pretty sure it was me they were afraid of." And she says, "Yes, because nothing instills fear quite like bragging how many times your sister has saved your life." Eva asks her what happened today, and she says, "What do you think?" Akiva's talking about her. She might glory in a well-fought battle, but never in a slaughter. To set the scene, they are looking for more civilian chimera. Hazael is the one that hears the scream, and so he goes first and Akiva follows him. And Hazael says, "That's strange. I could have sworn I heard something down here," as they're staring at the group of chimera. Akiva says, "Must have been a bird," and they agree and they leave them alone. Then on page 159, overnight on dark silent wings, while Akiva was struggling to save the enemy one family at a time, the rebels were sending the Empire such a message that Joram's response must blow away any hope he had of allying the killing. Death ruled them all. This whole book is just so sad. Like, everything is wrong. So 100 red smiles made by the shadows that live. The angels must die. It was an echo of the Emperor's own infamous words, the beasts must die. So then we come back, and Karoo was good at a lot of things, but driving wasn't one of them. She wouldn't be for 18 for another month. That is, unless you counted her 2 lives together. She should have asked for credit for that. Karoo hated guns, but she knew what they could mean for the rebellion. The bigger reason, the thing that she always came back to for not doing so, was Brimstone had never brought guns into Arret. Saw drums while she's out shopping, and there used to be singing and drumming in the camp, and she thought of Ziri and Xander clowning in the court, the laughter that she'd had no part in, and she bought 10 drums to take back. "I prefer my victims to know who killed them, so they can dream of your lovely face for all of eternal slumber," Hazael said. Liraz says, "It's a blessing to die at the hand of someone beautiful." She says, "There are 2 reasons I'm glad I am misbegotten, and both of them are Jael. The first is I will never serve under him, and then the second is I will never lie under Jael." And she says, "I'm safe because I'm blood, and thank the god stars for that, if nothing else." And then Hazael says, "You're safe because you would gut him with your bare hands if he ever tried to touch you." But then she says, "But what of all the other girls? Is life worth keeping on with whatever happens?" And Akiva says, "Yes, as long as you're alive, there's a chance things will get better." But Loraz says, "Or worse," and he agrees, yes, usually worse. Karoo comes back from her shopping trip, and Thiago is debriefing people, and he stops to ask if everything went all right. And she says, "Yeah, fine. You don't have to stop. I was going to listen." He says, Is there someone that you're worried about?" And Karoo's face went hot. "No." She was rattled, realizing that anything she said now would come across as concern for Seraphim, for Akiva. She realizes during this conversation that Thiago flat out didn't want her to know what he was doing. Then we have Akiva's invisibility manipulation. She remembers it. She ends up disappearing and going and listening to the report, but Thiago scented the air because they all could smell her. So then they're talking about the shadows that live. They had a way of pulling the shadows around themselves to stalk unseen among the enemy. The Emperor's brother looked cut in half. A scar ran down the top of his head right down to the center of his face, hooking under his chin and stopping, unfortunately, just shy of his throat, and no one knew how he had gotten it. So then the Stellians, to Akiva, his mother's people were more phantoms than rebels. And so we don't really know a lot about where Akiva comes from, but we know that that's where his magic comes from, if I'm not mistaken. Jael says to him, "I probably shouldn't admit it now that you're the hero, but I argued for killing you back then. No hard feelings, I hope, due to the pollution of your blood." Jael says, "Pity, one does so hate to be wrong about these things." And then he asks for a woman to be sent to his room. Akiva says, "We have no women here, only soldiers." And Jael says, "Well, one can hardly be choosy in a battle camp. One of them will have to do," which he's so gross. We're talking about the fact that Ziri is still a natural chimera. He has not been reborn yet. This is where Zuzana starts figuring out that they're going to try to find Karoo, and she tells Mick that it can be one of your tasks, and so that's how she convinces him. Basically, we don't know what's going on here, but everybody who came back from the task that they were sent on, that Ziri is late to come back from, is like really depressed. It was clear that something went wrong. Then there are more angels still following that same group that has the Dashnag boy and the Caprine. Wrath, the Dashnag boy, kills some of them. Sveva saves him by stabbing somebody in the armpit for the first time ever, and then they stand together while the Caprine run away. But then the Revenants come and they all fight together, but he died with them and burned. Sveva ran. So there's nothing more that they can do, says Hazael. I just love that we're watching this character development of Hazael and Laraz slowly become more aware of like what Akiva wants and like be on his side. Laraz is saying that she's sad that she had never given anyone mercy. So in this scene, Ziri explains that whenever the Revenants fight, they always leave somebody behind so that they can watch and stay alive, so that then they can go collect the souls to be reborn in the Thuribles. And so in this case, Ziri was the one who was left behind. And he's basically talking about how he thinks that they picked him because he is still in his natural body. But he's talking about how it was really awful to have to watch, you know, his comrades in arms be slaughtered. And he's going through and they were burning, so he knows that burning hastens evanescence, and it had been hours already, so he's got to go in. It ends up being a trap, and so Ziri is like fucking hilarious when he's in this setup. So he thinks at first that he has a chance because even though he's only one and there are like 6 soldiers, he can definitely take them, but then he realizes that there are 12. But he's being hilarious. So 1 chimera is worth at least a dozen seraphim. Okay, so this is his story of how he thinks that Jael got his scar. We were having dinner together, as we do from time to time. It was rim grouse, overspiced. You killed the cook for that. Temper. You know, in a story, it's the details like that that make it seem real. Anyway, you got a bone stuck in your mustache. Did I mention you had a mustache? A wispy, sad specimen, but never mind. I went to cut the bone out using your sword, and that was my mistake right there. It's much bigger than I used to. And, well, I missed. Spectacular, really, though I always say I wish I'd missed in the other direction. He mimics slashing a throat. Nothing personal. He was a blur. He took the laughers first, and 2 angels were dead where they stood, throats gaping open before the others could even draw their weapons. But Jael tells everyone to keep Ziri alive. So by the time they disarmed him, their host was halved. He was able to kill 6 of them, but they wanted him alive, and so he was. And basically, they do a lot of torture, and he's getting freaked out, but then he realizes the only person he's ever watched tortured was Akiva over Madrigal. He thinks about how he doesn't believe that Akiva would have ever told Thiago anything, and strangely enough, that gave him strength. Carew then finds 2 humans in the desert, and she's arguing to keep them alive. Then it ends up being who guess who, Zuzana and Mick, and Carew had certainly learned that possible and impossible were rough categories at best. She tells Thiago that these humans are my guests, and the words had come from some iron place within her that hadn't existed an hour ago. It just was, not persuasive, desperate, or antagonistic. And she says, their lives are not a luxury. These are my friends and I trust them. And Thiago says, that changes everything. And he's all, you know, perfect gentleman. But his smile, it was just wrong, like he'd learned it from a book. And I don't trust him. Zuzana asks about Brimstone, and her stricken expression was all the answers Zuzana needed. Same with Issa and Yansri. And then she asks about Akiva. The bleakness transformed to severity. Karew's jaws clenched. What about him? Is he alive? Last I heard, come on. Carew shows rather than tells Zuzana and Mick what she means by the fact that she made this body. So she wakes up Bast, until now looked rather like an Egyptian cat goddess. And basically she still looks like an Egyptian cat goddess, but a lot more animal and a lot less human than she used to. And Bast's soul, she discovered, had a delicate beauty ill-suited to be a soldier, and she wondered briefly what sort of life she might have had in a different world, but they would never know. So then when Bast wakes up, she says, thank you, and something clenched in Carew's chest. None of them had ever thanked her before. You're welcome, she said. Do you need help down the stairs? And she says, no. As I said, it's well done. A compliment. It was kind of ridiculous how grateful she felt for those few words, which made me cry when I was reading it, so that's great. So then Zuzana gets all excited, and she wants to make it because she's a puppeteer, and this is making living things. Mick figures out that she's also Chimera, and they're not surprised that she's Chimera. It's kind of obvious. She says she was Kieran, and instead of trying to explain what that means, she tries to draw herself, but she ends up drawing Ziri, and Zuzana says, you were a guy? And Carew says, no, that's not me, that's Ziri, he's Kieran too. And Zuzana says, I don't know why it would be freakier if you were a non-human guy in your previous body than a not-human girl, but it would. So then this made me sad. So she talks about Romeo and Juliet. Imagine if she woke up and he was still alive, but he had killed her whole family and burned her city and killed and enslaved her people. So then Ziri falls from the rip in the sky down to earth. Yeah, he falls down and he is still alive. His face is cut in the same way that they did to the angels in the smile. And then he's got he's gray. Like there's something on his face that's gray. And then his hands are all messed up. Carew decides that she's going to try to heal him because she's never done that before, but it is similar magic, but much more complicated. And we find out that Akiva helped him. So Akiva fell to his knees. He hadn't breathed since he saw her. His glamour failed. He thought she was dead. If Carew had still been looking back, she would have seen the shape of him cut and in and out of the air. We switch locations. Now we're back with the Seraphim, and Jael gets this information. They found this thing in the ruins of Ark Carnival, and it says it's a seraph, which means that it's fucking Razgat, and I hate him. Ugh, I'm so mad he showed up again. So then we cut back to Ziri. They realize that what is on Ziri's face that's making him look gray is ash. Carew says it looks like he ate it, and Thiago says darkly, or was fed it. And then his hands were pierced through as if he had been crucified. Thiago, being his annoying self, says if he can't use his hands, this body is of no use to him or to me, but it's his natural flesh. I know, and as rare a thing as that is, do you think that he'll thank you for salvaging it if he can't hold his blades? But Carew says, I can do it. Thiago makes them wake him up so that he can get information on what happened, and he can't speak, so he doesn't get much information out of him, but we know that Ziri didn't give any information away. And then, oh my gosh, I was crying at this part too. I'm gonna cry again. My baby Ziri. Ziri hit himself on the chest with his mangled hands, and finally she got it. He wanted her to use his pain to tithe, and she's like, no, you have to be conscious for that. And then his face contorted in anger at her, and fresh blood started pulsing from his slashes, and so she tells him to stop, and she finally says okay. Oh my god. That part was emotional, obviously. So then she asks Susanna to help her and says, like, if you are not okay with doing that, then you don't have to, basically, because, like, it's this horrific sight. But immediately Susanna comes over and helps her. And so they heal him together, and wow, I'm sad. After doing this whole set of healing, it took a lot of energy and stuff, so Carew passes out. Susanna and Mick are hungry, so they decide to just, like, go through this Casbah with all these monsters around them and who don't speak each other's language, and they decide to go try to find food. They're gone, and they're looking for food, and then Carew wakes up having a dream that it was a Kiva there, but then of course it wasn't, and what ran through Carew's mind in that instant was bitterness, a double pang, one for when she thought it was him, and one for when she realized it wasn't because she woke up next to Ziri. And then I really like this line from Akiva. He wouldn't wonder what there was between the two of them because he's watching her and Ziri be sleeping next to each other. He had no right to wonder. She was alive, and that's what mattered. Okay, so then we get a lot of stuff. So Ziri wakes up as well when Carew wakes up, and he says, I know I don't deserve your help, not with the way I've treated you. I wanted to speak to you, and I should have. He ordered us not to, but it felt wrong. And she's surprised by this, and she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Ziri tells her that Thiago said we couldn't trust you, but I do, and she gets mad. He told me that he was working on all of you, that you'd trust me in time, and then Ziri explains that he reminds us as often of your treason. Thiago has been telling all of the Chimera that she's the one that told the Seraphim about the Thuribles and the resurrection, which is not true. Thiago told Akiva that during his torture session. That makes so much more sense because I was trying to remember earlier in the book, how did they know that she had this relationship with Akiva? Because how did they know that she was magical? Thiago has been feeding lies to both sides to keep everything in his way. Then she realizes that Brimstone might have died thinking that she gave away the secret, and she is devastated by that. While Susanna and Mick are out finding food, they brought Mick's violin, and so all of a sudden there's a scream and Carew freaks out. And so then we move on, and Susanna covered her ears and gritted her teeth. Mick was more diplomatic towards Verko, one of the Chimera. That's right, that's how it makes sound. But then he takes the violin and starts actually playing. Mick is more in awe than he was scared at this whole thing, and so then he starts playing violin again, and it was a clear object of fascination. So the surprise from the whole Chimera crew is that the same instrument that produced Verko's screech was also this instrument that is making this beautiful music, and it was only wonder and stillness, music and stars. We jump back to Carew and Ziri because Ziri tells Carew to wait, she can't go yet because he has all this information to tell her. So he has to report to Thiago that he still has the Thuribles of all of his tribe. Okay, it's now Tuesday, 14th of May, and I have finished the book. I have this much to show you my annotations for. Also, if you can hear background noise, I apologize. There are people cutting trees on my street, and we're just dealing with it, so sorry.
He doesn't know whether to tell him that all of his crew are alive because they disobeyed his order. It was a counterattack on Seraph civilians. That's what they didn't do, and it's a terror campaign. So this is when we're finally finding all of that information out. Akiva, Laraz's voice sharp. Jael's soldiers had a chimera surrounded. This is Ziri, and this is how he was saved. But even Hazael didn't know what Akiva was capable of. Each hand speared through by a sword from a soldier he had killed. This is Ziri being tortured. And Jael feeds him the ashes. This was a friend of yours just a few hours ago, open wide, as he's trying to get Ziri to tell him who the thuribles are for. Birds, Ziri told Karoo, every kind, I don't know how many thousands, driving the angels back. Swords that held him were driven too deep into the earth to shift, so he had set his teeth and pulled, and that's why one of his hands was worse off than the other. Somehow he had used that mangled hand to free the other. He couldn't hold the blades. He lowered his head and used his horns, but they weren't sharp enough to pierce the mail. He was intent on doing what he said he would in killing the captain of the Dominion, but he couldn't find them, so he took the gleaning staff that was still there. He believed there was only one possible explanation for being alive, and he couldn't keep it silent. He tells Karoo that he thinks it was Akiva, because the only time he'd ever seen magic with the birds like that was when the hummingbird moths had fanned down from the constellations of lantern light to settle on Madrigal's bare shoulders. Laraz says we should have killed him when we had the chance, talking about Jael, but then Hazael says we didn't have the chance. Couldn't Akiva have made the birds kill him, and then who knows what our brother can do? She's talking about the woman who was older than the other female soldiers. She volunteered to go to Jael's camp. She had volunteered to spare some virgin of being thrown at Jael. She thought it was an act of courage unlike any other she had ever witnessed. And then Jael is gross towards Laraz, misbegotten, what a pity, you're a fresher fruit than some of the others who've come my way, because he's nasty. Then we come back to Zuzana. Karoo is telling Zuz that shadows that live are assassins, like me. Zuzana says cheerfully, no, not like you, not pretend assassins, real assassins. And she says that they're cool. Karoo says, I suppose Thiago is a peach too, and she goes, ew, no, non-peach, wormy peach. And well, at least they agreed about that. Zuzana tells Karoo that she was awesome. Holy Karoo, you're my hero. Karoo says, you're mine too, so we're even. And then Mick wants to be someone's hero too. And Zuzana says he's her fairy tale hero with one task down, 2 to go. Karoo feels shame about the sugar all these years later because she had let herself be dusted with it, not quite admitting to herself that she was ready to surrender to him. And she is questioning if she had been such a pliant thing. She wished she could believe that she would have awakened to her foolishness without Akiva coming, but she doesn't believe that's true. And so then she's asking herself, what would Brimstone do about what's going on? Akiva shows up, and Karoo shows her Hamsas to him, and he endures it, and he doesn't move, he doesn't go away or towards her, and it feels like the same as the day of her death. He's looking at her with horror, despair, and love. He's just depressed and saying that he wanted to die too when he thought she was dead, and it would have been easy. He doesn't deserve peace. Akiva had never been a stranger, and that was the problem, a slow pull of longing. How could she still not hate him? This thought is what Akiva sees flash past her face, a sudden flare of violence and loathing. He failed to recognize it. It was self-loathing, and he was lost. They're talking about how Karoo never trusted him with the fact of the Thuribles and the resurrection, and she tells him that she never trusted him, which is just depressing. This is why I wanted to die, he says. He turns the small square of paper so that she could read it because he thought it was her. So then we get this different perspective that we haven't seen yet, and we're watching a concubine of the night go to the Emperor's intersanctum. She's obviously scared. This must be the first time that she's ever doing this. He says that sometimes women choose to leap rather than be delivered across the bridge that they have to go across. If Nevo alone were the girl's consort, he couldn't swear that he would do his duty, and he's basically thinking that like that's probably why they have so many guards do this concubine walk, because that way they hold each other accountable, which is disgusting. And then we get an idea about the Stellians. There was Seraphim. He knew next to nothing about them, and no one did, and that is what Akiva's mom is.
So then at this point during this scene, Joram, the Emperor, finds a fruit basket at the bottom of his bed, and no one knows how it got there, and it is from the Stellians. And because the Stellians were able to somehow get into the castle, get into his bedchambers, and leave this fruit basket completely unnoticed, they didn't try to hurt him or anything, but because of that, he has all of the guards executed that were on that night. So this character that we just met in this scene is also
So then there's a change in Laraz on page 326 because she hasn't done mercy yet and all this stuff,
and she finally comes to Akiva and says, "You said one only has to begin, so how do we?" And I just love this change in her. So this is Issa coming alive. First exhalation carried the world's sweet girl. Karu's sob escaped and her face found the place it wanted. Against Issa's neck, where human flesh transitioned to cobra hood, and I'm just obsessed with it. Karu cheats her way into not telling the truth about where Issa came from by saying, "Do you know how much faster the resurrections would have been going if I'd had her helping me all along instead of 10? Basically saying, like, why didn't you tell me that she was in this pile of thuribles? Thiago basically says that we have no need for wings, and Issa says, "Where are your wings and yours?" towards 10. She basically calls Thiago out for never thanking Brimstone for making all of his different bodies, and Thiago says, "Thank him for what? He did his job and I did mine." And she says, "Indeed, and you asked no thanks either, or adulation." There was sarcasm in Issa's voice. Her tone was as sweet as her smile because she was mocking him. The second she shows up is the best. In regards to Thiago, he's very angry that Issa has showed up because Karu defied him. She couldn't help thinking that he meant something more personal than that when he says, "I don't have to remind you what's at stake." She's worried about Mick and Susanna. I'm rolling my eyes so hard that it took 2/3 of this book to finally figure out that what Thiago wants is for her to teach 10 how to become a resurrectionist so that he doesn't need her and he can kill her again. Like, duh. Of course, Issa being Issa, he knew you, child. She's talking about Brimstone better than you knew yourself. Because, of course, he believed that Karu never gave up the secret. Issa's also talking about the fact that Karu fell in love with an angel, and she says it was brave, it was rare, it was love, and it was beautiful. Akiva has been here because he saved Ziri. So Issa asks, "Do you think that he'll reveal the position of the Chimera?" And Karu realizes that no, he won't, and she trusts that. You proved yourself a long time talking about Karu that you're not under Thiago's spell, and that's why he hates her. Thiago finally blatantly threatens Susanna and Mick, so then they get them out of there. Akiva decides that he's going to kill Joram, the emperor, and he basically says that our father will see our faces before he dies and there must be witnesses. We find out that Akiva is the 7th Akiva, and that's a lot of dead Akivas. And Akiva says, "Tell me, what does it mean?" And Hazael says, "It means that the cremation urn is full. No room for your ashes. You have no choice. You have to live." And I freaking love Hazael. I'm
Thiago
so sad.
also makes Ziri add himself to Razor's group, and they're the ones who are the most likely to just be fine with killing people. 10 also basically threatens Ziri by saying 7's one too many for a team, isn't it? 6 is a nicer number. And she also threatens Mick and Susanna and says that the wolf would probably let you choose which one dies first. Karu tells Susanna and Mick that Thiago had her beheaded for loving Akiva.
So then we start off the next group section of this book with the fact that we have learned from Issa that at Loramendi, Brimstone thought of the idea of making the entire church a huge thurible for thousands of souls, and so we're not 100% sure if it worked, but it's possible that there are thousands of souls. They might still be there, soul form. Knowing that, Karu brings it up in front of the whole group of Chimera and tells Thiago about it, hoping that this will mean that the Chimera will choose not to follow Thiago into this like murder fest that he's planning. They are excited about this potential for all the children being alive and stuff. Thiago finally, he like gives an inch by saying, "Yes, okay, we'll go looking." And then no one is brave enough to step up as part of Karu's except for those who had already done it, which was like just a few people. During that scene, Karu also points out that Thiago gave the civilian Chimera hope by showing that the Revenants were still alive, but then you abandoned them, and do you know that they died watching the skies for you? And she also tells Thiago about the fact that Ziri's team didn't do what they were supposed to do in killing civilians, and she says that somebody has to stop first on one side of this butchering that's going on, and Thiago says, "Let it be them then," so cold, his lips trembling with the effort not to fall into a wolf
And we
snarl.
switch perspectives back to Akiva, and he's like concerned that Joram is threatening him in this scene because he doesn't know why he was brought into the private chambers and stuff. Find out that Akiva's mother was named Festival, and she's the one that gave Jael
his nasty scar that's on his face. We also realize that Joram is not concerned at all about Akiva, Loraz, and Hazael because he's like half naked and in the bath when they show up. Akiva realized he never had feared he was suspected. Joram was so swollen with his own legend it would not occur to him that he might be disobeyed. Joram gets mad and he says that you have no mother, you have no father, you are a hand to swing a sword, you are a thing. We keep switching back and forth. So now we're in Karu's point of view again, and we find out Amzalog and the Sphinxes, who were the only three who had taken Karu's side during the argument that just happened in public, have been taken to the pit to be murdered. We jump back to Akiva's side, and we know that the Silver Swords might have believed that they had advantage from numbers alone. There were 8 to 2 of them. This is after now they've killed Joram. We find out that Japheth, which is the son of the Emperor, so the technical heir to the throne, has pulled one of the serving girls against him as a living shield, and here is the new Emperor. Basically, Akiva, Loraz, and Hazael walked right into what Jael wanted, because Jael wanted his brother dead, and he wanted Japheth dead, so he kills Japheth in order to be able to take the throne himself, and now he can blame the Misbegotten, who are Joram's bastards, for it all. Then we jump back to Karu and Thiago, and she's confronting Thiago, and this is a horrible scene, so this has a lot of trigger warnings for sexual assault. If that is anywhere triggering to you, I am going to go through all of this, so you might want to skip ahead. She confronts him and she says, and here stands the great hero of the Chimera, murderer of his own soldiers. And he says, they weren't my soldiers, apparently their mistake. Thiago basically says that our resurrectionists can barely handle building an army, so what would we do with all of those souls? She starts really berating him about, like, it still eats at you that I chose an angel over you. And then this is where it starts getting nasty. So he says, wasn't I kind? Wasn't I gentle? But I see I was wrong. And do you want to know? I'm glad. There are other means of persuasion. He's like choking her. She was gasping, and Thiago was over her, heavy and far too strong. And he bit her, he tore her. The jeans did stay put, though even when he yanked so hard it dragged her a foot across the ground, and she felt all that gravel in her hands and her back. And then this time when he yanks at her jeans, they are peeled down and caught on her boots. But she fought, she didn't fall still. She tore out of his grip and reached for his eyes. She pulled back just in time and she missed and dug grooves on his cheek instead. She's realizing that Issa should have been here by now. What have they done to Issa? And then he's oh, this part is so gross. Come, love, he said, a purr in his voice. Let me in. Then finally she grabs the knife that she was waiting to pull, and she sinks the blade to the hilt in the soft hollow of his throat. She fucking killed him. So then we jump back to Jael, and the Misbegotten has everybody murdered except for the Misbegotten, including the people who were working with him to get Joram killed. Jael points out that Akiva is a magus, which means that he can control magic, and then he would like to have him on his team, but he can't trust him. And then he finally lets Akiva know that he found out about everything, about Karu and everything, through Razgut, so I wrote, fuck Razgut. Then Akiva finally realized that they're planning on invading the human world. Razgut, this piece of shit, he let Jael know that all of these humans already worship angels, so if you come, they will do all of that you wish, and it'll be easy. And so he's like, good idea, and he tells him about all the weapons that they own and stuff like that. That's the new plan, and it's all so then we jump back to Karu and Thiago again, and Thiago is dying. So then her arms are shaking violently, and it was a few tries to get her jeans up, and she can't get the button in her frustration that she couldn't make her fingers perform this simple action, bursts into tears. She finally hears wings, and she's panicked. Again, to Jael and Akiva, Akiva realizes that he wants to bring the human weapons into the human world because he wants to take care of the stallions, and we're not sure why yet, as far as I know. Jael is being gross towards Loraz again, and Hazael steps in and he says, I've always wanted to be a bath attendant. You should take me instead. I'm nicer than my sister. And he says, you're not my type. And Hazael says, well, you're not anybody's type. No, wait, I take it back. My sword says she'd like to know you better. We discuss again the fact that, like, just this one woman, Akiva's mother, is the reason that he hates the stallions. Like, that can't be. And Jael says, festival, she was wild as a storm, and storms are dangerous things. Then he starts trying to get Loraz as an attendant, and he says, you would rather die with them sooner than scrub my back, and she says 1,000 times. But then he says, my dear, don't you see, knowing that is what makes it sweet? So they have the revenant hands, you know, the Hamzas, which still work their magic, but Hazael still dealt a death before his own came to him. So in this scene, Hazael dies, and it's depressing. So the sword goes through him and out between his wings, and they stabbed him in the back, and I'm pissed. Oh my god, this card is just so sad. Because of Hazael's death, Akiva does this like crazy magic thing. So a thrum he felt inside his skull was like 1,000 summoned wings. The sky lurched. The disturbance was felt over the whole orb of Eretz. So he does something wild. And so then they jump perspectives into this Stellian woman, and it's a woman standing at the railing of a terrace looking out over a pale green sea, felt the tug of wind at her hair, and looked up. She was young, strong, her wings were flame, and her eyes were too. I wrote in the margins festival because I think that's who this is, but we're not, we don't know that. They don't name her. The sword, symbol of the empire of Seraphim, exploded outward with massive force and just like shatters. So like some crazy shit is going on and we don't really understand what's happening. And then we find out that all of the misbegotten left to go to gather at the Kirin Caves and await their brother Akiva. Then we go back to Zuzana. We're back in this like funny
I feel like a
moment.
fly when it's trapped in the window and almost dead. And Mick says, yeah, fan faster, and you are a goddess of air circulation. So we just get back into this like funny groove after getting all of this horrible stuff. Zuzana is thinking about like all that she's done and all this stuff, the fact that she can now, make herself invisible, and she says she's going to be the scariest grandma in the world. There's this moment where Mick is drawing, like letters on the back of her. He spells Zuzana, will, you, and then she catches M, and she's getting nervous because she thinks he's going to spell Mary, but then she's wrong and it's a K, and he says, how do you spell what? I was writing, Zuzana, will you make me a sandwich? What did you think? Oh, how embarrassing for you. I can't ask you that yet. I still have 2 tasks left. Very funny. I'm not joking. And I just love them so much. We are back with Karu. A day had passed since the pit somehow. She says, I am stardust gathered fleetingly into form. I will be ungathered. The stardust will go on to be other things someday, and I will be free as brimstone is free. This is Issa. As long as you are alive, there is still hope. I freaking love Issa so much. Akiva and Laraz have carried Hazael's body all the way to the Casbah to find Karu to try to save him. And Karu says, okay, but you realize he won't be angel, he'll be chimera. And they say it doesn't matter, save him. And she asks for the thurible, and they don't have one. I'm so sad that Hazael is dead. Laraz doesn't believe her right away. She's like so angry and grief-stricken that she just thinks Karu is lying. Thiago and Ten walk into their room. We think Thiago is dead, so this is just a shocking moment. They take the angels to like the granary to sleep or whatever. This is finally when we realize that he wasn't really the White Wolf. We don't know who he is, but the White Wolf's body is inhabited by someone else. Akiva also realizes in this scene that Karu has bruises that were not made by clamps but by hands, and he understands that this was Thiago. Blah. So he gets mad. But then we finally find out that it was Ziri in Thiago's body. Perspective, taste of Karu's blood is still in his mouth, and his revulsion lingered, and the worst part, so did hers. How many days passed had he been gripped by the hope that she would finally see him as a grown man, but the stars were ringing with laughter now, which is just, I love Ziri, I'm sad. Karu puts her hands on him and says, I know who you are, I'm with you, Ziri. Ziri, I see you because, wow, I'm sad. Ends up being the wings that she heard was Ziri coming back alone. She's realizing that even though she killed Thiago, they'll make her bring him back. And that was all she had to say. It was Ziri who saw what to do and how and who did it. So he kills himself so that she can put his soul into Thiago. She, of course, questions doing it and all this stuff, but she ends up doing it because it's the only way. And then we also find out in this scene that Ten is no more Ten than Thiago was Thiago. She was Haxaya, and it was easier with her because she obviously doesn't have this experience of being almost raped by Thiago's body. Akiva goes back to Karu and tells her the plan that Jael has, and he's going to close the world. So he's warning her that you need to decide which side you're going to be on, and she goes, of course I'm going to go to Eretz. It's too late. The angels show up in the world, and so all of the Chimera and the Misbegotten are in the Kirin Caves hoping to do something and work together, but it's not going well so far. The Chimera are putting their hamsas on the stone wall that separate them, and the angels can swear they can feel it. There's obviously some hate between these two different groups, but they're hoping that it'll go, and the only thing that's bringing a little bit of hope is Mick's violin, because Mick and Zuzana came with them, of course, because they're perfect. The last thing that
Hazael. Every hour, Akiva wishes Hazael were here. He would have had them all playing dice together by now, he tells Laraz. And it's so true. So that's the end. This book is like so dark and fucked and just sad. It's so much negative, and I'm so excited to read the next one because even though, I mean, we're gonna get the war, so like bad things are gonna continue happening, but this one is very little hope. Like, we just have all of these civilians being murdered and all of the big players being murdered, and nothing really good is coming in this story until the very, very end. It's just all very rough. So I'm excited for the next one. That is my book diary for Days of Blood and Starlight. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments down below what you thought of Days of Blood and Starlight. The live show for Dreams of Gods and Monsters, the time and date are not announced yet, but it will be on my channel, so make sure to hit that subscribe button for that as well. And I will see you guys very soon with a new video. I make them every Thursday and Saturday. All of my social media is linked down below in case you're interested in following me any other platform. And I will see you guys very soon with a new video. Bye!